to the new Chemist. We're glad you're listening. Feel free to download this podcast on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Here on the new Chemist, we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as careers, community, research, and COVID-19. We're happy you're tuning in. My guest today is Dorraine Duncan. Thanks for joining me this morning. It is good to hear from you. Just briefly, I'll inform my audience about you. Dorraine Duncan is an accomplished analyst at HR&A advisors in the greater New York City area. She has served as a Forefront Fellow in 2019 in the Urban Design Forum. Also, she was a project manager for RISE New York City, which was a part of the New York City Economic Development Corporation. Along with those accomplishments, she was a Georgia Tech Climate Fellow, a graduate research assistant at Georgia Tech, and a Georgia Tech teaching assistant. While at Georgia Tech, she received a master's degree in public policy and a master's degree in city and regional planning. Moreover, her undergraduate degree was in mathematics at Kalamazoo College. A well-rounded, accomplished young person, please welcome Dorraine. Good morning, Dorraine. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, David.
Yes, it's good to see you after such a long time.
Same here.
Yeah. So, what have been your long-standing interests in the field of public policy?
So for a very long time, I've been, interested in sustainability and resilience. And I think while I was in Jamaica in high school, I didn't have the language. I didn't know that was what I was interested in. But I think, having grown up in a small island, I think you become very aware of, natural disasters of all kinds. So whether it's hurricanes or floods or droughts or whatever it may be, from a very young age, I'm used to seeing those things. And I think I became very interested in the ways that, these natural disasters impacted people and the way that people kind of responded to those things. So from high school, I understood and I really enjoyed things like social studies and geography. And I think my kind of translation of that into sustainability kind of happened later on, probably in college time. But I've always had that interest in understanding how the environment impacts people's futures, impacts people's families, and the way, in turn, that people impact the environment. I've always been interested in that. And the language came on, much later on in my life.
Okay, that's interesting that you said that the passion and interest was there. But for you, the way you articulated it or expressed it or fleshed it out, it came later on. So along the lines of that question, just before we transition to more, would you say it's essential or critical for Caribbean students to study sustainability or be aware of sustainability? Would you say that would be beneficial in the curriculum or?
Of course, without a doubt. I mean, I think island populations, we are at the mercy of so many environmental forces on a regular basis. The lack of water, electricity, all of these things that, by and large, you don't think about if they are provided for you on a regular basis. In island context, we know that we have to think about these things. You have to be concerned about water. If you have a very active hurricane season, that the prices of food is going to be more expensive in the next coming months. And that's what's happening right now in Jamaica, not regardless, but also the impact of how the environment affects you is very much dependent on your income, your access to power, and kind of social mobility. So I think given the fact that, Caribbean islands, by and large, their, income inequality is like a big issue in these countries. The way the environment affects people on a daily basis is extraordinarily different. If you go uptown, nothing really phases you. If the hurricane happens, your house is secure, that your water supply is secure, that you're going to have electricity to do your homework or do work. But for everybody else, that you have to plan for these things. So I'm staying at my father-in-law's house right now, and there is, several extra buckets and bottles of water in the bathroom. Why? In case water goes away, you can wash your hands, you can flush the toilet, So you have to be planning ahead for all of these things. And I was happy that we had, geography and a couple science classes focused on the environment. But as you said, I do think we can we need to improve the education, the environmental education that we're giving to people in the Caribbean, and have it be more focused on, the ways that climate change are impacting our future, impacting the population.
Yeah, that's good, because even me, they have a fellowship program, another fellowship program at Indiana University, which is where I study, and they're talking about climate fellows. So that's something I'm probably going to look into. Yeah. So how do you maintain view of the bigger picture in your career and in your life in general? When you face obstacles, challenges, Dorraine, I would say you have been very accomplished thus far. So how do you maintain view of the bigger picture?
I think this is a very hard question for me to answer, because I think on a regular basis, I'm a very big picture thinker. So it's very easy for me to think and daydream about, alternative futures for the Caribbean, alternative futures for Jamaica, solutions to different environmental problems or social problems, right? But what is much harder for me is to break that vision down into actual actionable steps and step forward to that. I think that's much more difficult for me. And I think, this year especially, and probably towards the end of 2020, trying to be intentional about writing down these big picture visions. I have these big goals, writing them down on a paper, because I feel like the act of writing down something that you have in your mind kind of forces you to think about something that is concrete, because it's concrete on paper now. You have to be thinking actionable steps to get to that point. And it's hard. It's very hard, because I feel like I think about a vision that's achievable maybe 25 years from now. So the immediate things, what I can do right now, is not very apparent. But I think I've been trying to commit myself to writing it down and being intentional about researching, if I want to start a business, what is the first step I need to do? I'm going on YouTube and finding people who are doing similar visions and understanding their trajectory and the steps that they've taken to get from point A to, point Z.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. That's good, because one thing that I have to keep in mind sometimes, even with me, it's a challenge, because you have these goals for yourself, whether it be personal, professional, academic, whatever the goals may be. You have to keep in mind. I have to keep in mind that the decisions that you make today do impact those goals later on. You have to be quite cognizant of the decisions that you make. Yeah, I agree.
And I think, just to add to that point, I do feel like sharing some of these visions with people that you trust is helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
Sharing it with someone that you trust to hold you accountable. So, in the next 6 months, someone can ask, so where's the business? What's happening on that front? And having someone outside of yourself, outside of, your dream book or whatever you write it in, to ask you questions, to hold you accountable, to keep you encouraged, to keep you moving on, each individual step to the big goal.
Yeah, because one thing that I keep in mind on the same point, when you innovate in isolation, it gives a false appearance of novelty in some instances. So what I'm saying is, sometimes even in science, you'll be researching or reading something and you'll be like, whoa, I just came up with this idea. In isolation, you think it's novel, but when you go amongst people, they tell you, dude, that's already been discovered 15 years before you even joined anyone. Yeah. So
and not just the fact that you could lead to duplication, but the fact that you're probably missing out on collaborators. People who have these same visions may have a complementary skill to what you have, and you could be working together with them to move forward.
Yeah, and the thing I like about collaborations is, I'm actually, my research project for this graduate program, which I hope to be until I finish my PhD, because I like it. The research program I'm working on, the specific project, is a collaboration between 3 different professors. Yeah, so it's rich. It's like some good Caribbean jerk or some good Caribbean is rich. So how have you been adaptive and creative in the field of public policy?
Okay, so my degrees are in both public policy and city planning, and I think both of them are very similar because they're such broad fields. In essence, like when you leave a planning program or you leave a public policy program, what you're leaving with is just a set of tools to apply to any sort of societal problem that you see fit. With public policy, you have an understanding of how government works, of how policies are built, how legislation is passed. With city planning, you're given a set of tools that are more spatial in happening. So you're understanding how zoning works in a city to facilitate, certain conditions within a city. So I think both of those tools are broad enough and are constantly being innovated enough that you can apply them to anything. So for me, I came into grad school already having a deep excitement for sustainability, particularly the type of sustainability that is most relevant to Caribbean islands. But understanding that those same skill sets can be used for things that I didn't see in my future. So as an example, when I graduated from Georgia Tech, I moved to New York, and my first job was with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. One, I never saw myself working in economic development because there's this false dichotomy that sustainability or economic development, the two of them don't happen at the same time. But here I was working in this space, working on the advancement of renewable energy in the city. But also thinking about the fact that this can create jobs. This can create meaningful jobs for, various communities, particularly communities of color in New York. And understanding that I had to kind of reapply my understanding of, sustainability as a system. Of course, renewable energy is one part that I'm interested in and also kind of have experience in, but understanding that the training of people to work in this industry is as important as the technologies themselves. Understanding that, the workforce development side of it is as important as the technology itself. And I think planning and policy are helpful in having you approach problems as systems. So if you think about sustainability as a system of both environmental actors, human and technological actors, and economic actors, then you realize that you don't have to just be working on the environmental side to have a role in that system, And I think being a part of both of those disciplines, I think one, I think I'm a jack of all trades by nature, and I feel like those type of professions force you to keep thinking that way, force you to keep thinking big and multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary. You have to think that way when you're in those spaces.
Yeah, that's good. Along the same lines, you made the point that just because you're working in one sector, whether it be with environmental actors or under the environmental domain or regime, it doesn't mean you're not impacting a larger goal. So because you have human factors, societal factors, and all those other things. So yeah, I completely agree. So you went to Kalamazoo College. You went to the very good institute, Georgia Tech. And you how did you seek or find the right environment for you to thrive intellectually? How did you choose those schools? What was the guiding factor?
I'll be very honest with you. For Kalamazoo, I went there because I got a scholarship. I think when I was graduating my last year of high school, based on the subjects I did in sixth form, I got into UA, and that's the University of West Indies in the Caribbean, and I could have done geology and geography, or could have done actuarial science. I was not confident that, I wanted to do either of those subjects, kind of because the way that the education system works in the Caribbean is kind of you're streamed. So depending on the subjects that you do in high school, it kind of, maps out a path for you in tertiary education. And I knew that what I wanted to do didn't sit squarely in either of those spaces. So at the very least, I knew that I wanted to be able to explore liberal arts education, a place that I could kind of jump from discipline to discipline, because, my jack of all tradesness was popping up from there. So I told my parents that I want to go overseas and, get this type of education. In sixth form, I applied to a bunch of colleges. I didn't get any scholarships. And I was like, all right, my parents can't afford to pay an entire tuition. So I stayed. I basically took a gap year and I worked during that year and reapplied. So the second time I applied, I got into Kalamazoo and I got a pretty good scholarship. Never heard of Kalamazoo, never seen snow, don't know where Kalamazoo is, but I'm like, I'm going because the scholarship is there. And I feel like that is a testament to kind of what happens with Caribbean people. You're from a small place, but you see an opportunity and, you're going to take the opportunity kind of regardless of where it comes.
Right.
So I ended up at Kalamazoo College. There were 10 other Jamaicans in my year who were obviously thinking, the same exact way I was thinking, that this opportunity popped up, we're going to go. And I think the liberal arts education was extremely helpful for me at that stage in my life. I needed to kind of get a feel of multiple different things because I'm interested in lots of different things, and it's allowed me to do that. And another aspect of the liberal arts education, at least at my school, that I cherished was the fact that it had study abroad. It paid for me to go and study abroad, and I was able to kind of explore sustainable development a lot more in Southeast Asia. It's a context that is actually very similar to the type of development trajectory that happens in the Caribbean. And then, having had that experience, I was a lot more precise with what I wanted to do in grad school. And I think I also was able to kind of get the network to help me get to grad school, because no one in my family had been to college, no one in my family had been to grad school. But I had resources at Kalamazoo to help me figure out that process, help me figure out the fact that, when you're applying for grad schools and you're starting getting offers, you can negotiate, you can ask for more money, you can, ask for more funding. Yeah, I know, like this was news to me. So I applied for...
Some of this is news to me.
David, you should have talked to me before. But when I got into, probably 4 or 5 different schools, and, all of them are giving me some amount of funding, but not sufficient. And I was just like, I emailed them. I'm like, I'm from this, I'm from a third world country. I need extra support. Like, I'm really interested in your program, yada, yada, yada. Can you do more for me? And they did more for me, and Georgia Tech gave me a full ride.
Are you serious?
I am dead serious. Gave me a full ride. I was like, all right, I'm going to Georgia Tech. I didn't know where Georgia Tech was, but at least I knew at the very least it was in a bigger city than Kalamazoo was. And I was excited for that, to go to a school that's in a city that I can practice, public policy and city planning in a city that has the type of diversity that I'm interested in, experiencing while I'm there for, X amount of years.
Wow.
So yeah, I think kind of the schools you go to matter less than kind of what you're trying to get out of those schools. I feel like it's kind of corny people say, but education is kind of, your experience is what you make it. Because I could have gone to lots of other different schools, and I feel like I could have, having the knowledge and the base that I had and the network of people to give me that knowledge, I could have made, I probably would have been in the same or similar place as I am right now. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good, Dorraine. That's good. I feel like I should take a page on that book.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, everything is a negotiation, and I do think that is one of the difficult parts. And you're coming from, context or families that don't have significant experience, doing grad school or doing college. No one telling you this stuff. But, I had like a white friend in school who all of their parents or grandparents, aunts and uncles went to grad school. So they know the system, and picking up those pieces of information and sharing it within our circles of, immigrant communities, people of color. Like, it's very important that you're sharing that information.
Yeah, that's true. Along those same lines, you made the point that you just studied abroad in Southeast Asia. Was it in Singapore?
No, it was in Thailand.
Thailand, okay. I know Singapore is really big on that development and stuff like that. Yeah. What stood out in Thailand?
Repeat the question?
What stood out in Thailand?
I mean, so much. So the program there was on sustainable development within the context of, a country that's rapidly developing. And I think for me, for people who go, coming from the Caribbean or wherever and are going to schools in the West, so in America or Europe or whatever, the way that they teach policy, the way that they teach city planning, lots of these kind of governance-based subjects, it feels very different than the reality to exist in your home countries. The level of informality that exists in Jamaica, the level of kind of like banduloism and corruption, like all of these different issues that are just like present and rampant within our countries, they kind of just don't talk about that. So we're talking about city planning, and we're not talking about people who are living in informal settlements. We're not talking about informal vendors. That's just not a part of the conversation. And I think for me, that study abroad program was the first time that we're able to like accurately capture the realities that exist, the economic and the social realities that exist in developing countries. So once I got there, it felt like Jamaica. It felt very familiar to Jamaica in every aspect of it. And there's also a big part of it that was talking about tourism, which of course, both of our islands are extremely dependent on. Yeah. So like having those conversations and thinking about how do you create an economy that is not exploitative of the environment, but actually kind of regenerate the environment was just super exciting, because everything just felt so relevant to me. We're talking about the tourism sector, we're talking about the fishing economy, all these different aspects of it, food, agriculture, like all of it felt the most relevant to me and my experience in Jamaica. And I think by and large, it's probably like the most influential part in like shaping what I've done academically and professionally.
Wow. Yeah, so that's good. So how do you maintain a balanced life given all your responsibilities and accomplishments? How are you maintaining or trying to maintain a balanced life?
I don't know, David, and I don't know if I'm doing a great job at it, to be honest.
I know what you mean.
Like you, I feel like I'm someone who likes to be involved.
Yeah.
I like my extracurriculars.
Oh yeah.
Whether I'm in school or like, graduated from school, I'm like, which club can I join? Like I feel like that sort of that community that we're creating by joining these clubs, by joining this like professional society or whatever it is, like, of course there's a networking professional aspect to it, but there's also like a community aspect to it that I value a lot. So at Georgia Tech, jumping and finding Caribsa was so exciting. Like meeting you in the math center or wherever we would meet, and you're like, oh, there's a Caribbean society, like was an extremely exciting point for me. And I feel like every place I go, I'm constantly looking for a community. So whether it's a community of people who are from my region of the world, or of people who are in my, kind of professional field, that community gives me energy. And I feel like it's a space that, I feel like I can share my experiences and be given advice, be given kind of support from people who know exactly what I'm talking about. So in New York, I've been lucky to also find that community. I'm a part of the American Planning Association. The New York chapter has a group called DivCom, Diversity Committee, and it's a group of people of color who are all city planners and policy people, focus on the same sort of things like urban development of different kinds. So you have people who do sustainable planning, you have people who do affordable housing, you have people who do transportation planning, and it's all people of color. So there are a couple of Jamaicans in there, there are people who have all these different experiences. And I think for me, it's been such a rewarding group to be a part of, because the amount of advice and information I've been able to get from those people and just like moral support has like kept me energized in New York, which is like a very competitive place to be, uprooting yourself from Atlanta, moving to New York to try and find a job is like a very difficult process for anyone. And that group has been super helpful in all aspects of that. So that's one part of like, maintaining a personal balance. And I think also just like trying to find, trying to set boundaries, basically, So at the current job I'm in consulting now. The idea of work-life balance is, it's not a big thing, it's not really respected in the industry, but trying my hardest to be like, I'm not going to respond to emails after 6:30. I am not going to, check my messages until work actually starts at 9:30. Like I just actually had someone send me an email. It's not 9:30. I'm not going to respond to it until 9:30. So trying to be deliberate about setting those boundaries and pushing back at like these expectations that encroach on my time, Like it's not always successful, but I'm definitely trying to be intentional and keep up those boundaries.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Setting boundaries and relying on community. That's good. I would say having a good community is important, especially when it comes to sharing your experiences, sharing your stories, and also having a community that understands where you're coming from. So it's not just you are the outlier, and you have to try and explain everything to them all the time. Yeah, so
For
that's
sure.
good.
For sure.
Yeah, so what would you say has been the cause or the driving factor for your success to this point? Yes. What would you say has contributed to your success?
My success? Well, I mean, I appreciate you thinking that. I don't know. I have to acknowledge that I come from a very privileged family in Jamaica. I've had parents who could afford to send me to a very good prep school, which then put me in a position to go to a very good high school. So all of these things, I realized that may have changed my complete trajectory in life had I not been afforded those resources. So obviously I'm very thankful for my parents who set me up, to be able to take advantage of all these resources and wealth of knowledge in the spaces that I've been able to occupy. But in terms of my own kind of drive, I do think, as I said, I'm a very big picture thinker. And I feel like I always have in the back of my head or the front of my head, a vision of the future I want for Jamaica, the future that I want to help build for Jamaica. And for me, going back home has always been the ultimate goal, returning home and having a business idea or setting up some organization that's doing this type of work, sustainability minded work, has always driven me. So the choices I've made professionally or academically, it's is this going to help set me up for what I want to do in Jamaica? Yes, then I'll take it. No, then maybe this is not for me. So I think having that end goal of what you kind of want your future to look like is helpful in helping you choose what opportunities to take, because not every opportunity is for you and not every opportunity you need to say yes to. But yeah, I think just having that kind of clear vision of what I want my 2030 to look like, my 2035 to look like.
Yeah, because time is like money, so you have to spend it wisely. You have to value how you invest in your time, and not every good opportunity is something for you to take.
Yep,
that's
for sure.
I've had to remind myself of, because in these academic institutions, a lot of good opportunities pop up.
Yep.
But if you try and take all of them, you'll spend too much time on every single one that the thing you came up for, you might not be able to.
Yeah, and you spread yourself thin at that point too.
Yeah.
I do find that happening to me sometimes. That I'm so excited about lots of different things, opportunities pop up, and I'm just dang, I probably shouldn't have said yes to this because I have no time to do it well.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah, you have to have a vision. So, why did you choose mathematics as a field to major in?
Not to disappoint you, but okay, let me not say it was just because of my parents. So I did math in sixth form in high school in Jamaica, and I liked it a lot. But if you ask me, did I like math because I liked it or because I was good at it at the time, maybe I would have said the latter. I think I liked being, good at math. I liked being kind of in competition with other people, being in extra lessons class for math and being I'm the one girl competing with all the guys who are really good at math. I think I enjoyed that. And then I got into college and I was my first year, I was okay, all right, I'm still decent at it. I'm not great at it anymore, but I'm decent at it. And then by the time I got to my third year, I was this is not relevant to me, in all honesty. It just felt so abstract from the kind of the visions that I had for myself at that point. Because I'd already done study abroad. I understood sustainability, sustainable development is something I'm interested in. And I didn't see a place for math anymore. But it was too late to change my major. So I continued with it, graduated with it, and then I had the minor in environmental studies. And I would like make jokes with people like, I regret doing math. By the time I got to like applying for grad school, I was surprised at how many like programs were like, we appreciate the fact that you have done math in undergrad. The fact that you have proven mastery of some extent of this technical subject means that you're bringing like a analytical nature to public policy and to city planning, which like in themselves, like you wouldn't expect, but they do have an analytical component. In public policy, one of the most difficult classes I was doing was statistics, but I had that kind of edge up having done math in undergrad, so by and large, I don't regret doing math or having that ability to like kind of switch to an analytical mindset. I think it has served me well in both fields as I am in now.
Wow, that's good. Yeah, past experiences do give you a framework for you to progress and interpret what you're going through. So, as we conclude, do you have any advice to those wanting to pursue the field you are currently working in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Caribbean needs more people like this, or just the world generally. I think what excites me about both public policy and city planning is that it forces you to think about issues like systems, as I mentioned before. And I feel like once you start viewing the environment as a system of different actors, of different institutions, of different, pieces of infrastructure, then I feel like the kind of false boundaries and silos that we have in the government, in the society, kind of start coming down. So like me as a city planner who's interested in climate change, I know that like I need to understand manufacturing. I know that I need to have relationships with people who could be potentially building, solar panels or offshore wind turbines or whatever it is. So the kind of fake idea that like I need to be in this space and only occupy spaces that say environment, those walls start crumbling. And I feel that's extremely important, especially for nations that are developing, that you understand, the food system is extremely interdisciplinary. And if you're able to capture the fact that all of these issues that we face work as systems and you need to be intervening on multiple aspects, then I don't think, we're going to have like a development that is being able to be sustained, really, So I think regardless of what career you end up, the mindset of thinking of problems in systems is extremely valuable for not just the Caribbean, but just generally everywhere. I think that's helped me build relationships, relationships with people who do transportation, relationships with people who do housing. And I think it's also been beneficial for me because like I'm not intimidated by going into a field that like I'm not familiar with, doing projects that are food related, doing projects that are workforce related. I'm not intimidated by that because I understand the way that systems work.
Wow, that's good. That's very good. So what is some of the most beneficial advice you have received?
So much. I mean, I think for me, the most beneficial thing someone has told me is to be deliberate and articulate about what you want out of particular experiences and to say it to people, when you're starting a new job, when you are starting a new grad program or undergrad. Define the vision of what you want to learn. Say that like my interest in environmental studies is because I want to focus on Caribbean nations and the problem that exists in Caribbean nations. And sometimes that may not result in anything, but sometimes you defining what you want out of an experience helps people connect you better to different resources that can help you, build that experience. So saying to people that I'm interested in the context of island nations, in sciences generally, they may be able to connect you to a professor that's also from the Caribbean. They may be able to connect you to someone that's doing research in a Caribbean island, whatever it may be. And I think that's been something that has stuck with me throughout my academic and professional career. I think one thing people will say about me is like Dorraine is very not forceful, but she articulates what she wants, and she articulates, what she's trying to get out of an experience. And I think that has served me well. And of course, the kind of other side to that is like, what if you were not sure what you want? I mean, that can also be something that you say to people, like, I'm not sure what I'm wanting out of this experience. So maybe giving me like a diversity of experiences and perspectives within this like academic or professional space is something that you need. You need to be able to explore multiple different options so that you are quickly able to realize what you don't like and what you like.
God, Dorraine, you dropping nuggets, man.
I'm trying.
Dropping nuggets. But Dorraine, thanks again for joining me. It's good to have you on.
It's good.
Thanks for listening. We're glad you were able to tune into this podcast. Once again, this is the New Chemist, where we discuss chemistry, which simply put is the science of change, as well as the other sciences, careers, community, research, and COVID-19. Thanks again for listening. Note, the views on this podcast represent those of my guest and I.